Hey, what's up YouTube? It's Trader 101 here, giving you a deck profile of the Plant Synchro deck that I used at this weekend's YCS Toronto. I was able to place in the top 32, going 8-2 after losing round 1 to Jarrell Winston, winning out into the last round of day 1, losing to my good friend Jesse Samek, and then winning the last 2 rounds on the bubble on Sunday. I changed a few things in comparison to the deck that I posted last week, and I figured this video would just go over some of the changes. I took out a few cards in the main deck, might have changed the side deck. I didn't change the extra deck though. Before I jump into the deck profile, huge shoutouts to Billy Break for winning his first YCS. It's been a long time coming, and I know the Yu-Gi-Oh community as a whole is very happy to see him walk away with the championship and not, leave Canada with another second place. He also took it home for the US, which is great. Good US versus Canada finals there. Anyway, before I get into it, I have to give another shout out to Jesse Samek, because I went with him on the trip, and some of the card choices in here are based on our playtesting from Thursday, and our decks were very similar. He also placed in the top 32, so congrats to him. Anyway, let's go with the 3 Reborn Tengus, because obviously these plants are going to be playing 3 Tengus this format, and then of course the 3 tour guides. Next up, for the hand traps, we have 2 copies of Effect Veiler, 1 copy of Maxx, which was huge this weekend. I elected only to run 1 copy, which differs from like Billy Break and Jesse and some of the other players, because I acknowledged that about half the field was going to be agents and plants. I felt like the other half of the field Maxx was going to be completely dead against, and I ended up being accurate with that assumption, because I only played 2 agent decks and 1 plant deck in the 10 rounds of Swiss, and the other 7 rounds as a whole I sided out Maxx quite a bit. I played against multiple gadget decks, hero beat decks, and stuff like that. So I felt like it was the right call for me to play 1 Maxx, but I acknowledge that 2 Maxx is completely legitimate, and I know the reasoning behind playing multiple Maxxs at this event. But I knew, from my perspective, that I would only want to play 1. A Gorz, so those are the quote-unquote hand monster traps. Of course, Black Luster Soldier, Spirit Reaper. I was on Spirit Reaper last week, and through testing throughout the weekend, I definitely determined that I like Spirit Reaper. It was a huge card this weekend. Forced out a lot of Solemn Warnings, and I could follow up with Black Luster Soldier, Reborn, or some other power play with 1-for-1 perhaps. So I definitely approve of the Spirit Reaper. Of course, the 1 Debris Dragon, Sangan, and I main decked 1 copy of Thunder King Rai. Originally, I was running Breaker the Magical Warriors, and I acknowledge that Breaker is still good, and they were in the side deck, but I wanted to go with Thunder King Rai-Oh, because I felt like in the mirror match it was just going to be so critical to perhaps get rid of their Sangan after they went turn 1 tour guide, and it is a light monster, which did come in handy when it comes to summoning Black Luster Soldier throughout the weekend. And I mean, granted, it stays at 1900, which surprisingly was relevant this weekend in comparison to Breaker, like getting over stuff like Tengu and whatnot. A lot of people ran 2 Thunder Kings, but I went with the 1. I mean, I could definitely see running 2 Thunder Kings though, without any question. And then I ran, of course, the plant engine of Spore, Lonefire Blossom, Glow Up Bulb, and Dandylion. So that's the monster lineup. For the spells, I ran only 2 copies of Mystical Space Typhoon. Again, I didn't want to jump to 3, even though it was placed that on the banned and restricted list. I felt comfortable with 2, just like last format. This is where my build differs probably from most of the plant decks in the top 32. I was still big on Gold Sarcophagus heading into this weekend. Some people elected to run stuff like Pot of Duality, but throughout this entire weekend, regardless of what people thought about this card, heading into the weekend, I thought it was better than Pot of Duality. And throughout the weekend, I would always Sark for Heavy Storm, Black Luster Soldier, Monster Reborn. Constantly, I was opening up with Sark or drawing into it within the first 4 or 5 turns and just setting up ahead of the game. And I specifically won several games because of this card. I would Sark Heavy Storm against Gravekeepers. I actually ended up playing 2 Gravekeepers, and it would just completely dictate the way they played, because if they didn't have stuff like Starlight Road or Solemn Judgment, they wouldn't play the Necro Valley first of all, and they would only be sending 1 back row. So it was critical. When those type of decks know you have Heavy Storm and they don't have a way to combat it, they have to change their playstyle. 2 enemy controls. Enemy Controller was incredible this weekend. This card is one of the most skillful cards in the game because of all of the different usages it has that players don't necessarily realize. I could just go on and on about some cool plays that I did with Enemy Control this weekend, but I mean, you can kind of learn it from experience. You just use the card and you realize how awesome it is. The 1 Avarice, of course, 1-for-1, Foolish Burial, of course, Monster Reborn and Dark Hole, Heavy Storm, and Mind Control, the kind of big 4 of this format. And then Book of Moon, and this was a tech that Jesse told me about on Thursday when we were driving up from Boston to Toronto. It was Scapegoats, and I actually ended up liking it this weekend. Did some cool plays, some Trishulas with it. With this and Lonefire Blossom can get you into any synchro any level you want, except Ally of Justice, Decisive Arms, but I didn't end up playing that anyway. So Scapegoats kind of replaces what the other Lonefire Blossom did in terms of always having access to Dandylion. This way you'll always have level 1 guys to tune with. I mean, they are Earth, so Glow Bulb you could go into an Injury Beast, but there's no room in the extra deck for that. But yeah, Scapegoats was a huge tech this weekend. I know Billy ran it, I know Jesse ran it, and of course, here I ran it, so I know at least 3 people on the top that ran that card. The traps, double Solemn Warning, Solemn Judgment, Trap Dustshoot, a Torrential Tribute. I put Mirror Force in the side deck and elected to main Dimensional Prison because after testing I found that I was getting really frustrated with my opponents poking with Sangan. And if I played against TGs, I'd much rather have this card. If my opponent had Stardust, of course I'd much rather have this card. If my opponent was running a myriad of other decks, I always wanted to have this card. And potentially if my opponent was main decking something like Starlight Road, again this card comes in more use. And against stuff like Gravekeeper's Recruiter, so big call maining this over Mirror Force. And I only played one Call of the Haunted. I kind of figured out quickly that multiple Call of the Haunteds is completely the opposite thing that you ever want to have at the same time. You never want to have 2 Call of the Haunted. It's like virtually never a good thing. And it was really frustrating to like open double Call of the Haunted in testing, and it just always would set me back. So I like to just only play the one call. For the side deck, I did side an anti-meta. I sided out my plants almost every single game this past weekend, and it worked out great. I won so many matches because my opponent would have Dead DD Crows, Veilers, Maxxs, and they would just keep setting them against all these big monsters. So here are like the big beaters for the anti-meta side deck, the double Fossil Dyna, double Breaker, Kycoo, and Thunder King. And then I played a DD Crow, just kind of like, in case I played plants, I assumed that they wouldn't be doing the exact same side decking, so I did have the Crow in there. And double Smashing really helps with the side decking when you go into the anti-meta, and it's really good with Spirit Reaper coming game 2 and 3. This was so big. Summon Reaper, Smash, get wrecked. Double Bottomless, huge. This card was so good this weekend for me. It's just always one of the better side deck choices, especially when you're siding anti-meta. It really helped. The second Dimensional Prison, and then I took out the Mirror Force from the main deck. Of course, made that switch. I put a Starlight Road in the side deck and a Chain Disappearance. I never resolved the Road, though I didn't really side in that often anyway. But I was always afraid of stupid stuff like Lightsworn. Might as well show you the extra deck since there's time on this video. The Trishula, Librarian, Catastor, Formula Synchron, Armory Arm, Scrap Dragon, Bryonic, Stardust Dragon, Ancient Fairy Dragon. Never summoned this card, but there wasn't a situation where I'd want to summon Arcanite Magician anyway, because that was the decision. I was thinking about this or Arcanite, but I ended up going with this. And the reason I thought I wouldn't need this card is I didn't think I'd play a lot of Gravekeepers, but I ended up playing 2, and on the bubble, let alone. That was very nerve-wracking, playing against your worst matchup on the bubble, but I did end up pulling that one out. A Black Rose Dragon, an Orient Dragon, and then I won like 10 games maybe with this card. I'm not even exaggerating. This card won me so many games. Leviar the Sea Dragon is one of the dumbest cards I've ever read. It is so powerful, especially in the situations that you can protect it and your opponent just sits there and realizes that you're going to continue to plus off this card. Seeing as how the reason you summoned it was off of one single tour guide, it's already netting you one of their remove from play monsters or one of your remove from play monsters, and now you can't get rid of it, so it's just going to net you more plus. This card is so ridiculously broken. Leviathan is, of course, the other level 3 rank, and then Roach and Utopia. I ran Roach over a lot of the other options, like Decisive Arms and this and that. I didn't end up summoning Roach, and there wasn't a situation where I would need any of the other synchros. So I guess that part didn't matter, but I still think Roach theoretically would be better for the most part. It's just good against stuff like agents and whatnot, even though, of course, they can just go Venus and go into you Gaichi and attack over. But other than that, when you can know their hand or can read what they have, this card can really help against, obviously, Hyperion and all that nonsense. Anyway, thanks for watching. This, of course, is the new mat. I don't know how many people have seen this mat. It's the new YCS mat. It's kind of cool. I like the card zones. They're all over the place. A lot of people don't like the new symbol, this new shield they got here, but I guess it's an opinionated question if you like that shield. It's blue. It doesn't really match the color scheme of this mat because it's such a vibrant blue. But anyway, thanks for watching. I know the top 32 deck lists have yet to be posted on Konami's website, so here's a sneak preview. If I was going to change anything in the deck, it would probably be to take out the Fossil Dynas because I didn't really like them, and putting Leeching Light. I knew about Leeching Light heading into the weekend. This was not something that I was blindsided with. Wow, all these players are citing Leeching Light. I had 10 copies of this card and passed them around to quite a lot of players. I knew about Leeching Light. I just felt like if I was going into anti-meta, I wouldn't have the opportunity to abuse Dandylion or Scapegoat as often to literally just blow out an agent deck. But in retrospect, I still think I would have liked this card because it is a great way to get over stuff like Hyperion and Blackluster Soldier, even if I have the anti-meta side deck. In some cases, I would keep in Scapegoat. So I would probably take both of the Fossil Dynas out for 2 copies of Leeching Light. But thanks for watching. Again, shoutouts to Billy Break for coming in first place. And shoutouts to anybody who I met this past weekend. Thanks for introducing yourselves to me. And that's it.